Okay, welcome everybody to the Southeast Regional Advisory Council meeting. Before we get started, I'd like to recognize we've got a couple of our wildlife board members, both online and in person. We appreciate them taking time to join us. This meeting's being held in person at the John Wesley Powell Museum in Green River, as well as being streamed live on YouTube. This public forum allows you to express your opinions, ideas on wildlife management in our state. This RAC considers your feedback on the proposals before us today and reports them to the Wildlife Board. The Wildlife Board, not this RAC, is in charge of setting wildlife policy for the state. Wildlife management is complex and it can sometimes get very emotionally charged. We all have ideas and opinions about what's best for Utah's wildlife. That's why we're here today. That's a good thing. We encourage anyone who wants to express their opinion at today's meeting to fill out a comment card. They're located on the back table. Bring them up to the front and we'll call those out for the appropriate agenda item. We expect those in attendance to respect the people who speak, especially those who hold views that may not align with our own. Respectful behavior helps facilitate efficient meetings where RAC members can listen, digest, and address the concerns and ideas and proposals being presented. Disrespectful behavior includes booing, yelling, cheering, laughing while someone's speaking. Also, please help us maintain respectful space by referring to people by their name instead of deceptors. If this behavior occurs, we'll remind attendees to be respectful. If it continues, those individuals will be asked to leave. Lastly, we ask everyone to please put your cell phones on silent so that we don't have interruptions during the meeting. Okay, with that, let's just quickly go around. We'll have the RAC members introduce themselves. Start down there with Scoot.
Yeah, Scoot Flannery representing Sportsman.
Kirk Player representing Sportsman.
Charles Fisher representing Sportsman.
Cash Stallings representing Public at Large.
I'm Eric Luke. I'm a Sportsman's rep as well.
Dana Truman representing the Bureau of Land Management.
Darren Olson representing the Forest Service.
Brad Richmond, non-consumptive.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, we have online. Steve, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Stephen Duke. I represent Sportsman at Large.
Thanks, Steve. Do we have any questions or comments regarding the agenda or minutes from the last meeting? If not, we'll entertain a motion to approve them.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion to approve by Charles, seconded by Brad. Let's take a vote. Scoot? In favor, go ahead. Raise your hand. Steve? Passes unanimous. Wildlife board meeting update. I had that printed out and left it, so yeah, thanks. Probably out in my truck actually, but the last board meeting was one of the big ones. Had quite a bit of stuff on the agenda. I'll try and be as brief as possible. Come, that's not moving. There we go. All right. The taking a big game ruling that that passed unanimously as approved. The deer permit recommendations that also passed unanimously as presented. Once in a lifetime permits that also passed unanimously. There was some discussion about contacting hunters, notify hunters when a hunt was available, regarding desert sheep or sheep when they wander out of their area. That is something that will be looked into to give the public more opportunity. The bull elk permit recommendations had passed as well as presented. The antelope permit recommendations passed as presented. The antlerless permit recommendations passed as presented. The CWMU antlerless permit recommendations also passed. The landowner permit rule was also passed as presented. One of the things that our RAC brought up, it made a motion to look into private landowner vouchers in relation to losing points and incurring waiting periods. That proposal is to be brought back to the board as informational item. It'll be presented through the public process again. So, Expo rule amendments passed as presented. Willow Creek CWMU, Hiawatha, those passed as presented as well. So, any questions regarding that? Any of those things that passed? Okay, if not, we'll turn time over to Chris to give us a regional update.
All right. Good evening. I was going to originally bring my laptop up here, then I realized that's what I should have done because I'll be looking over here at the PowerPoint presentation. But oh, never mind. Brandon will take care of me. Thank you. Thanks for being here tonight. Yeah, I appreciate all your service and the time you take out of your lives to donate to wildlife and representing those who you represent. So thanks for being here. It's a great time of year. We've hired our seasonal employees. They're on board. They came on last week or two. So our teams are out doing great work, habitat work, aquatic work, fish surveys, AIS work, AIS detection and samplings of waters, and all of our WMA work happens this time of year with fencing and farming and habitat improvements on our WMAs. It's a great time of year and we're busy. So I'll go over some things that are happening. We have had a vacancy for quite a number of months, 6+ months really, in our AIS program. So it's the AIS biologist who goes to the waters of both the Southeastern region and the Central region, and takes samples and tries to get some early detection and in these waters. And so that position, we held interviews last week, and we hired a biologist named William Fink, and he's coming to Utah. So that was exciting to have him come on board. Sometimes it's hard to hire in Utah because housing costs are so expensive. And a rural place like Price, where job opportunities might not be as great for families, but housing prices are still high. It's a little difficult. So we're grateful that we found one, and we're confident in his ability. Early season fishing has been going well. We did gill netting last week at Schofield. As we put out nets, we come back the next day and pull in those nets and see if our management strategies are working. And Schofield continues to look really, really good. Big tiger muskie, good sized cutthroat trout. There were a little bit of chubs, but the chub numbers are still way, way down, which is wipers were in the nets too. So our management strategies there are working, and it continues to be a popular and successful fishery. Habitat, as I mentioned, their seasonal started. So they've been working on farming, specifically at Gordon Creek Wildlife Management Area and at Nash Wash. We get some water this time of year for a few weeks, maybe a month or two if we're lucky. And so we're trying to put that water on the ground and get some things growing for deer and elk and turkeys and the wildlife that live there. We're also continuing to work with UDOT on some fencing projects. Law enforcement, we had Aiden, who was our officer in Emery County, took a position in the Central region. And so we had some movement there. Cheyenne Hudson was an officer down at Bullfrog for the last 5+ years, and now she is the new Emery County officer. So we're excited to have her come up north and be in our county, in our area, and she'll be working that area. The law enforcement officers also did a saturation patrol in the LaSalle's a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, a week ago. And it's good to have presence on the mountain with our officers and in that popular bear unit. And then they're also doing patrols at Lake Powell. Outreach section. They had a Bighorn Sheep Day, viewing day a few weeks ago here in Green River. But coming up in the future, we have a free fishing day on June 7th. It's statewide. But on that fishing day, our outreach team will be at have a fishing event in Blanding. So there'll be press releases about that and more information coming out. Our wildlife section is gearing up for a really busy time of year. We have neonate studies going on throughout the region. That's when fawns drop, we get an email giving us a location, and biologists get there within a matter of hours to put collars on these baby fawns, these baby deer, and we can detect their survivor rates, and if there is mortality, what was the cause of mortality. So that's a great study we have with BYU. We've been doing that for several years now. That'll continue throughout the month of June and maybe into early July as well. We do have some deer plans that are coming together. We'll be forming committees and working on those plans with the public and coming through the public process this upcoming year. So those committees are being formed now. And then we're also doing some IMBCR bird surveys. I'm not sure what the acronym means, but it's, breeding birds, neotropical birds that are in the area. And then finally, I'll mention Sego Canyon Trailhead. After a long time, a year or so of trying to get agreement between us and the tribe on access through tribal lands to the roadless area of the Book Cliffs through the Sego Trailhead, we received a signed copy of the agreement from the tribe in the mail about a month ago. And so we were really excited. We have a signed agreement with them. It's going to be a little bit different than what's happened in the past. The agreement requires a few things. It requires that you receive an access permit from the tribe in order to walk through their mile-long road to get into the roadless area of the book lists. They are committed to, they have a form you fill out. They're committed to a 21-day or less turnaround on that. And so there's still a lot of questions, can you fill out a form for the entire season? Is it just every single trip you take? You need a separate form and a separate request. Those questions we're still trying to figure out answers to. The form itself, we're still trying to figure out as well. We've seen 2 different forms out there, but we'll hopefully have that figured out next day or 2. So, but it's exciting. The tribe is also requiring a few things. They would like people who access the Sego Trailhead to have a Utah hunting or fishing license, or be accompanied by somebody who has a hunting or fishing license. So be aware of that. Yeah, so that's exciting. Let me know if you have any questions about that. If you go to our website and type in Sego Trailhead in the search bar, we have a web page that's dedicated just to this issue, and it answers a lot of questions you might have about how to access Sego Trailhead, what are the requirements, the form itself, who to contact on, who to send the form to, that kind of information. So, yeah, let me know if you have questions. And then lastly, RAC positions, nominations. We've had this open for a few weeks now, a month or so probably. It closes on May 31st. So if you know someone who's interested in the RAC position, please encourage them to sign up. We have some public at large, we have sportsmen, and we have watchable wildlife, which used to be non-consumptive. So those 3 positions we have available. There are some new requirements for being on a RAC or the board. You need to have a hunting license, a Utah hunting license, 3 out of the last 5 years. And so be aware of that. But yeah, I think that's it. With that, I'll take any questions you have.
Chris, I got a question. Working with UDOT on fence, do you have locations of that? Is any of the Spanish Fork Canyon?
Okay, Highway 6 is what the
Highway 6, yeah.
Yep. And 10. So improving those 2 stretches of road.
There is some in there. Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Any other questions for Chris?
Yeah, Chris, what units are they doing deer committees for in our region?
So the Manti, the Bajos, La Salle, and the Bajos, those 3.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to our first action item of the evening. Dedicated hunter rule amendments. Brian, you're on the hot seat. You have any clarifications, anything you want to have before we open it up to questions?
Well, the only thing I really, really want to say is that I really like being in Green River. So it's nice to be back. It's been a little while. So, but other than that, for the other RAC meetings, I've given like a 20-second kind of overview, and then just take whatever questions or things you want to talk about from there. So the dedicated hunter change that we're proposing is nicknamed banking, and the clarification I want to make sure we all really understand is that it's not really a perpetual accumulation. What we're going to do is for example, if somebody applies in the big game drawing to be a dedicated hunter and they happen to draw, then we will go and look at their history volunteering with us, and if they did any approved service from January 1st of that same year up until when the draw results are released, we'll merge that into their current 3-year term that they would have just earned. So that gives everybody basically double the amount of time that first year to earn the service hours if they want to take advantage of that option. And so that's what it's going to be, but it's definitely not going to store year after year after year and be used later. It's just going to be that front end. So that would be the clarification I'd like to make. So
I got a question. So when does this go into effect? So if For instance, I know I have a friend who was not aware of this change. We had an event that was a dedicated hunter project that he participated in, but we didn't sign him up for that.
Right.
Is he eligible? And he did draw this year. He found out after the fact that he
Okay.
drew. Would he be eligible for those hours?
He won't be in this year because it won't take effect until next year.
Next year,
It'll be a
okay.
2026 application. Yeah. Because right now it's not even legal for us to do until it passes the board. We can't do anything.
That's what I figured, but
Yep.
he wanted me to ask, so.
Yep. Good question.
Any other questions? Any questions from the audience? Scoot, did you?
I only have one. I saw that email that you sent about dedicated hunter for like, in rack hours and stuff. Is
Okay.
this the right place to ask questions about that or?
So ask me your question again.
So the email that went out just said that RAC meetings were no longer eligible for dedicated hunter hours. Is that the case or
No, they still can be.
am I tripping?
Yeah, there are a few RAC members that do take advantage of all the time and service you put in and attribute some of that to dedicated hunter credit. There are several that don't. They opt to do different things. Where it counts and doesn't count is if you've prearranged that with us before the meeting starts. So if you want credit for last time's meeting and we didn't know you wanted it, I can't help you. But the next RAC meeting, if you let us know in advance, we have to set it up in our online registration system, just like any other project, a field project or, whatever, so that when you go in and register for it, you're agreeing to the same terms and conditions as anybody else that would be doing volunteer service for it. And then it will go into the dedicated hunter system. So without that done up front, anything in the past we can't do, but for the future we could. So yeah, it's still an eligible option for you if you want to pursue that.
Okay, thank you.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the other caveat to that is if you can only count those hours if you don't fill out the form for compensation for mileage. If you fill that out, is that correct?
Well, mileage we're not concerned about that stuff. The board, like the wildlife board, can't use dedicated hunter or can't use their service towards dedicated hunter because they have a different type of stipend arrangement. You guys don't have that. So you can get reimbursed for your travel here and there, but I'm not crediting you time for getting here. It's when you're in this meeting is where the service counts for your
But you can still count the meeting time
yeah, the meeting
and
time.
get reimbursed for the travel.
Yep, meeting
Okay.
time, and then if we take a break for like 45 minutes, you're gonna cut that out of your meeting time, and so yeah, there's an option for you.
Okay.
Mhm.
Good. Thanks for that clarification.
Sure.
Any other questions? Any questions from the audience? Chris, will have any online summary?
Let me see here. We just had one person, we had two respondents to the survey. One person just filled out a response for one of the questions. So for this, we had one person say they strongly agreed somewhat agreed, and there was no comment.
Okay, we don't have any comment cards from the audience, so we will go to RAC discussion. Any discussion on the item?
I think it makes sense. So if anybody have anything else before I get ahead of myself?
I don't think so, so we'll open it up for,
Yeah, I make a motion that we approve the RAC's recommendations.
I'll second.
okay, we have a motion by Kirk, seconded by Cash to accept as presented. Any questions or discussion? Let's start with Scoot.
Yes.
Kirk,
Yes.
Charles,
Yes.
Cash,
Yes.
Dana,
Yes.
Darren,
Yes.
Brad,
Yes.
and Steve.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to our next one. So Colby ditched us to go be with his daughter for graduation. I can't imagine skipping the best rack in the state for his daughter, but
We have it up.
yeah. We have Dax, who is online, who is going to answer any questions that we have on this one. Dax, you have anything that you want to clarify before we open it up to questions?
Can you hear me, Eric?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yep. So this one's pretty simple. Just some language that changes conservation permit bighorn sheep season dates after some discussion we had in the fall rack. Not last fall, but the fall before. And then some clarification with regard to a memorandum of understanding or MOU with Antelope Island, where we could potentially issue additional public draw permits on Antelope Island without having to issue additional conservation permits beyond the current one bighorn sheep and one mule deer conservation permit.
Okay, thanks, Dax. Anybody have any questions for Dax? Any questions from the audience? Oh, this is our online. Was there anything on that one? Also somewhat agree.
Yes, 100%. One person filled out a survey and they somewhat agree. No comment.
Okay, we have no comment cards, so we'll turn it over to the RAC for discussion. No discussion, we'll entertain motion.
I move that we approve the division's recommendation on the conservation permit.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion by Brad to accept as presented, seconded by Charles. Any discussion on the motion? Scoot?
Yes.
Kirk?
Yes.
Charles?
Yes.
Cash?
Yes.
Dana?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
And Steve?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dax. All right. Our next one, this was the hot topic last night. I don't see too many outfitters in the audience to get carried away, but Chad, we will turn the time over to you. Do you have anything that you want to clarify before we open it up to questions?
I do have a couple of things for clarification, but happy to be here tonight. This is the best room I've been in so far. This is pretty cool. So I like the dinosaurs. As was stated, my name is Chad Bettridge. I'm the major over the conservation officers with the DNR law enforcement. And a couple of things that we wanted to clarify prior to the questions. During the initial presentation online, initially we said the renewal date was going to be December 31st. I just want to make sure that everybody saw that we changed that in the presentation. We moved that to March 31st. We just didn't want the renewal to happen during the hunt season. So we pushed it to March 31st. Secondly, I reached a Forest Service employee had reached out to me and notified me that our application process required the Forest Service's SUP to be added to our application process. Theirs has the same requirement. So we would sort of meet in the middle without being able to continue. We are, there's a possibility that there has been in each rack up to the point where we can change that to say that it's not required on our side, but that it is still required for them to have our number for their application process, if that makes sense. And finally, the final update is in subsection, 65772-3, the application requirement and approval section under 2E. It talks about attestation of that workers' compensation insurance and commercial liability insurance to cover employees and clients has been obtained. We received quite a few public comments regarding that about many of the outfitters and spotters, excuse me, not the outfitters, the guides and the spotters are 1099 contract employees. And that this kind of gets into there. There's some weeds in there, and we are willing to work with that phrase. There's and it's been tweaked a little bit in each of the RACs. So I just wanted to state those things prior to open it up for questions.
Thanks, Brad or Chad. Too many names tonight. Any questions? Dana?
Well, I wasn't able to watch the RAC last night. Is there a general summary of like what their main concerns were?
Say that again.
Do you have like were you able to watch it? Is there a general
I didn't
summary?
see, I did get kind of an update. I know, and I guess I have a question, so I'll stick with questions for now, but the renewal date.
Mm-hmm.
If you guys have moved it once, I take it that date's not set by the legislature, right?
Correct.
That has some adjustment to it.
Correct.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. I'll make a comment regarding that a little later, but for now, we'll keep it to questions. Anybody else have questions?
Yeah, I have a question. I feel like I've been seeing some discussion, but I don't quite understand it. So maybe you can help clarify for me that I feel like there's this concern that an individual client could hire multiple outfitters and end up with, 4 or some multiple, right? 4, 6, 8 different guides and spotters and kind of go against the whole point of the rule. Is that something that we can address in the rule? Is this something we got to address at the legislature? What are your thoughts on that?
The interesting part about that is it very specifically states in the bill, not in the went through the legislature, that a client cannot hire an outfitter, multiple outfitters for the same species and sex at the same time. It's 100% illegal as stated in the bill. And I'm not sure where the confusion came from that, but that's illegal.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
and that's legislated. That's not in the rule.
Perfect. And I do have one other question. Can you help me, and this is my own ignorance, can you help me understand a little bit the difference, again, whether in bill or rule, for the amount of guides or spotters you can have on public land versus private? Is there a separation there, or is it all treated the same?
This bill and rule is specific for public land.
Public land, okay.
So if you're going to participate in these activities on public land, you have to follow this rule. Private property, this doesn't apply.
Scoot?
Yeah, so one of the requirements for the application is that guides and spotters must obtain a certificate of registration for each outfitter they intend to work for.
Mm-hmm.
And that application is due on March 31st. So does that mean that they need to have that determined by March in order to make that application, in order to apply for their?
So I'll answer it a couple of ways. If you're an outfitter and you are going to, you were an outfitter one year and it's coming up to the renewal time, it's going to be the best for the outfitter to renew prior to March 31st because there's more to their application than a guide or a spotter. So if you're an outfitter and there's going to be a little box on the thing where you can click it and say everything from last year is the same this year, and you don't have to redo everything. If you're an outfitter and you apply after March 31st, you have to redo everything. So if you're going to be a guide, you just need to pass be eligible to be a guide, pass the criteria, the background, if you will, and then you pay your fee and you get the COR from the outfitter that you're going to affiliate with, and then you're good to go. So that doesn't, it still expires March 31st. You have to redo it, but it's not as a bigger process for a guide or a spotter. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for the first time though, so that's kind of a renewal, right, that you're talking about, or is that first time as well?
So in order to be a guide or a spotter, you must affiliate with at least one outfitter, and that has to happen each year you renew. And it's,
But it can happen any time of the year. It doesn't have to be done by March. So if somebody says, oh, I'm gonna be a guide starting, August, and I just barely
Correct.
decided that that's what I'm gonna do, you can do
Yes.
that.
you can do that, yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So clarify, that brought up a question for me. Say a guide wants to renew under 2 or 3 different outfitters.
Mhm.
Does he have to pay that fee up front by March 31st?
To be sure, the guide would only have to pay that fee one time.
He doesn't have to pay for each outfitter. He just
Correct.
has to,
One time each
Okay.
year. So it's, if the guide affiliates with one outfitter, he pays the fee, and he affiliates with the second outfitter, he does not have to pay the fee a second time.
okay. Thank you. That helps.
I've got some questions.
Charles?
Definition of outfitters, guides, and spotters.
Mhm.
How does the state define an outfitter? How does the state define a guide? And how does the state define a spotter?
And that was through legislation in the bill, it was defined, and I can read them for you if you'd like. An outfitter means an individual who offers or provides outfitting or guide services for compensation to another individual for hunting protected wildlife on public lands. A guide is an individual who offers or provides guide services on public lands for compensation. A spotter, where's the spotter? Means an individual compensated by a guide or outfitter to locate or monitor the location of protected wildlife on public land. And that was in the bill.
Okay, and then I guess another question I've got is it says no more than 2 registered outfitters, guides, and or spotters may be assigned to the client. Does that mean if somebody hires an outfitter, they can have a guide and a spotter, and the outfitter's not there because they'd still be taking that outfitter services, so they would have then an outfitter, a guide, and a spotter? Or does that mean that they can have 2 outfitters, 2 guides, and 2 spotters?
No. So what that means is a client, an individual with a tag, hires an outfitter to guide them on a hunt. While they're on that hunt, as long as it is a limited entry or general season tag, they can only have 2 compensated individuals with them while they're hunting. For once in a lifetime, they can have 3. But that's what their limit is. They can only have 2 or 3 compensated people.
So clarify that, because if the outfitter is he a compensated person? Because the outfitter may be there helping with the hunt. He's compensating his guides or spotters. Does that mean they could have
No.
3 people?
So if the outfitter goes and he's in camp, that's fine. But if they're actively participating in the take or the hunting of that animal, there still can only be 2 people.
Okay.
And I guess the grayness for me is if I'm hiring an outfitter, he sends out a guide and a spotter, then I think I'm good, but I've still hired an outfitter. So then I have 3 individuals that I'm paying. And at what point does that hunt start? Does that hunt start when I hired that outfitter? Or does that hunt start at camp? Does that hunt start when I leave in the morning and I got a rifle on my back? At what point does the law step in and say this hunt has started?
According to, sorry, I interrupted you, sorry.
Yeah, for only 2 folks to be out there.
So according to the way that we interpret the rules, once you get that gun on and you're out trying to actively take, that's where the hunt is. So in camp is one thing, hanging out, doing that thing, there's cooks, there's all these people that can be in camp. But if you're contacted by an officer in the field actively trying to take an animal, you can have 2 individuals, but they both have to have, their CORs with them that affiliate with an outfitter. So it all has to be on the up and up in the field. And you can only have 2 or 3 depending on the circumstances.
Scoot?
So is there anything in this rule that is intended to limit the number of people that can help pack out an animal after it's been?
It's a good question. Our intent is to say no to that. I mean, and again, it says while you're actively hunting, which is defined as taking of wildlife, which is also defined in code. So once the animal is down, the take has completed, and we want that animal off the mountain. So our interpretation of this, the rule and the bill, is that people can come help. It's once that's done, so that's and that's a good question, but as the bill and the rule reads right now, the hunting stops once the animal is legally taken and tagged, and then this rule doesn't apply anymore. Does that make sense? So compensation is an interesting question that I don't have an answer because that's not in this rule. So
I'll ask one more question before I make a comment and stick my foot in my mouth. With the renewal date, what's the reason behind the March 31st? Is there something set there?
Yeah, and maybe I misunderstood, but if they can still sign up after, I guess I'm stuck on, yeah, what is that March 31st date?
we had to have a date because it's an annual thing. I just smacked the mic. Initially, our hard date was going to be December 31st, just because that's the end of the year. And it makes sense, but talking to a bunch of individuals, they're like, there's a hunt that still could potentially be going on. So the reason March 31st came into play was because all the hunts are over. And it's the end of that time where the hunts are over, and it's just, and we had to come up with a date that says this is the renewal time. So.
Okay, thanks.
One last question. Since this is a rule, we're talking about this, it's an action item. What motions can we make that would have any weight?
So in the bill, it talks about that the board has authority to make a rulemaking authority over application requirements and approval. The renewal process, some prohibited activities. So the stuff that's actually in the rule right now is what we've been given up the ability to amend. There's a lot in the bill that's in the bill. So does that answer your question?
Can I ask a question on timing? So I understand the renewal date is in March, but what is like your application date? So if you wanted to have an outfitter, you have an outfitting company and you want to get the COR, you have a hunt that starts August 1st. Can I apply July 30th?
So
Or is
again,
there like a 2-week lead time or something?
what has to happen is you apply, you fill out the information online, and there's a process that we have to go through to make sure that you meet the basic criteria, and in that you have a business license, all these things that you put in there. Plus we do, I'm going to call it a background. We just check that there's not, pending wildlife violations or anything like that are fairly recent, and that there's not moral turpitude crimes, which is fraud and theft and things like that. And once that happens, we give our okay to the Division of Wildlife and they issue the COR. So it's possible, it won't be 2 weeks, but it might be a day, maybe 2, depending on when the application comes in.
Any other questions? Any questions from the audience? We have any online comments?
Just one comment. One person answered the survey and they strongly agreed with the presentation.
Okay, we don't have any comment cards, so we'll go to discussion from the RAC. I'll start. I like the idea of this, putting it in the hands of the division rather than Doppel. I get that. Doppel wasn't investigating or doing anything about those that were not doing what they were supposed to do. So I like that. There are a few things that I don't like. Number one is your date, renewal date. I feel very strongly that needs to be moved back to, I would say, July 31st. Reason for that, guides and outfitters don't even know if they're going to book hunts. We don't even have draw results by March 31st. people aren't contacting them to book hunts until May, June, and July. So the other thing I don't like about this is it feels like, and I know where it came from, it feels like big outfitters trying to push out little outfitters. Big outfitters can absorb these fees much more easily because they book multiple hunts. Smaller outfitters may only book a couple of hunts. That means their fees have to go up much more percentage wise because they can't spread those fees across as much. It does two things. It hurts them as an outfitter, but it also hurts the Joe Blow that draws a tag and feels like he needs some help, but he can't afford the big outfitter fees. That affects, them as well. So I guess I would really like to see someone make a motion that we ask the division to look at moving those renewal dates back to give those outfitters time to actually find out if they're going to actually book hunts. Just makes sense to me.
I guess I have a question on that. Are you saying that there are like a high proportion of outfitters that just flat out don't book any hunts? Because my understanding is if you book one hunt in Utah, you would go through this process.
You do, but these are set fees, right? For every outfitter, it's $500. And if, correct me if I'm wrong, but so say an outfitter has multiple owners. I know 2 or 3 different outfitters that have joint ownership. So how does that work for the registration? If say, let's say I know 2 outfitters that have 3 owners, joint ownership. Do they pay a one-time $500, or do each one of them have to be registered and pay that fee?
As the rule states, an application to operate as an outfitter must contain the name of the applicant and if the applicant is an entity. So if it's an entity, we still need it tied to a name.
Okay.
Then there's proof of registration within Utah, the business entities and Department of Commerce. So what that would mean is we have one individual who's the name of the outfitter that's tied to the COR. And if the other 2 individuals or whatever the circumstances may be, if they're going to participate, they're going to be a guide or a spotter. So you would only have to pay it once, as long but we do need it tied to an individual, even if it is an entity.
So one of those 3 registers as the outfitter.
Correct.
The other 2 have to register as a guide if they're going to participate in any way.
Correct.
Okay. So my concern is, there's set fees. You're $500 for the outfitter, $250 for each guide, and it depends on how many guides you have. $75 for each spotter. So depending on how many there are, they have to pay that fee up front. Now, for a large outfitter who books 20 hunts, that fee is dispersed all over all 20 hunts. So it only increases what they have to charge the client a smaller percentage. But if a smaller outfitter only books 1 or 2 hunts, all that has to be recovered in that 1 or 2 hunts. And so their fees have to go up substantially to cover that cost.
Eric, do you feel like this is kind of a business decision? Like in my mind, if I was the outfitter, I would pay for my own fee. And then I would tell my guides and spotters, if you want to come work for me, you pay your own registration fees. I'm not paying your fees. You pay them, but I'll give you business, right? I mean, isn't that a business decision whether you're going to cover the guide and spotter fees or make them cover them themselves?
I guess depends on if you want to have any guides. But
and remember,
yeah,
they only have to pay it one time.
One time. Yeah,
So
right.
they do have to, when they affiliate with an
each
outfitter.
year,
Each year they have to pay it one time. Yeah.
each year. Yeah.
But we don't want to limit the number of guides that they can work for as many outfitters as they want to, but they don't have to pay each time. Right.
So it does have to be paid by the 31st, or is that just when it expires?
That's just when it expires.
Okay, so that date is not when
it's that date is, it means more, or it's more important for the outfitter, just as far as the ease of renewal, I guess, is maybe the.
So the outfitter doesn't have to renew by then. He can wait until July or August to renew.
It's just he'd have to start the process over through you have to fill out all the paperwork. If you come to the, March 29th and you want to renew it, you just click that everything's the same from the previous year, and the process is easier. So you can still do it in July. It's just it's not an incredibly long process. It's just a longer process.
So I think of it as an expiration date. It's March. That doesn't mean it's the renewal date. So if you renew your subscription before it expires, it's easy. If you wait till it expires, meh.
Yeah, but I mean, if that date's, if there's nothing tied to that date other than just a renewal date, seems like for ease to make it more palatable for everyone, if we move that date back, then they don't have to go through the whole process again. We make it so they can click the button and it's an easy renewal.
One thing I will maybe remind is the bill goes effect July 1st. So once we get through the board and all this sort of stuff and all that is discussed and everything like that, and the rule is passed, everything goes into effect July 1st. So everybody must begin July 1st. And if we change that rule to July 31st, then you got a month you have to pay twice. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, but there's no hunts going on.
But I'm just saying there might be if we do that right now, we may have to pay twice. So
seems easy enough to make an exception for this first year, but
I understand what you're saying.
But I understand what you're saying, but just seems like common sense. If you sign up, because I guess there are houndsmen out there who may have hunts going on.
And this also, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. But
no, you're good.
This also includes guides for fishermen, guide services for fishing. So they're already, they fish year round. So.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know if you guys have had the chance. We just got an email from the newly formed Utah Outfitters and Guides Association on this with concerns they have about it. I like the idea of this. I like the idea of limiting the amount of spotters and guides on the mountain per client. Is if you've spent any time on the mountain during those big game hunts, you've seen multiple spotters, and it can get frustrating. But I do think, just speaking with you and looking at the legislation's written pretty broad, and I think kind of defining some of those things to make it easier to understand for guides and the public, maybe putting together some sort of committee with the guides being represented to kind of hash out some of these issues that might generally not be completely understood this first year, but figure out, like, when does the hunt start? What time does does hiring the outfitter and the guide count as year two? Does just a host of different questions that could come up with this. I'm no lawyer, but it seems like there'd be a lot of wiggle room in this law, and coming up with some defined policies against this law or for this law for the DWR, I think is a smart move to do. And putting that back on, giving that to the board to give to the DWR to get that put together and bring a bunch of stakeholders that'll be affected by this, so we can come up with a good solution to implement the law that's already been passed is a good thing to do.
Perhaps to piggyback that, we've done that on a lot of other issues that seem to come up, as just like increase in permits or something, but we form a committee from a lot of different entities to kind of work those things through, and perhaps we rush this one a little bit.
Well, this one never went through any public process. This was pushed through by the legislators, And so it completely, they will tell you that the legislation is a public process. It's not. So it circumvented the public process. So I don't disagree that there ought to be some public input. But right now, we have a law that, we're kind of bound by the law. So it's the rest of the stuff that we can work around to help make that law a little more palatable.
Yeah, I think
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Charles.
there's not much we can do right now. The law is in, but I think smoothing this out for the next year is something that we could easily do by bringing these folks together and then figuring out how this actually looks.
We're 100% on board with that.
Kirk?
Yeah, we do have a deadline though, right? Like we got to do something because this is happening and we can complain that it happened and that's, I think, justified. But I think we have to do something. And I also think, I'm guessing, that the definitions and the interpretation of when the hunt starts and who is defined as two people is more than you licking your finger and sticking in the wind, right? Like I'm assuming the lawyers for the division have looked at this. This is how we're defining it. This is what we think would happen. I don't know that. I think forming the committee is a great idea, but using that as an excuse to not present recommendations right now, I would think would be unwise because we do have a deadline.
And maybe I can clarify something, and maybe it'll just create more question, but that's fine too. Under the field requirements of the rule, 1A, no more than 2 registered outfitters, guides, or spotters may be assigned to a client at any given time while hunting protected wildlife. Hunting is defined in the bill. Hunting means to locate, pursue, chase, catch, capture, trap, or kill protected wildlife. So it's the actual act of doing those things. So that's why I was saying, once you strap that gun on and go out, that's when the hunt's in the way I'm reading that. That's when the hunt is going on.
So that brought up a question
I
because
knew
the
it
way
would.
you read that, it said no more than 2 outfitters.
Mhm.
That goes back to the question Charles asked.
So an outfitter can act as a guide. It's written in the rule too. An
Yeah,
outfitter
but
can-
if I'm a client.
Yeah.
The way I understood, the way you read that, I can have 2 outfitters, 2 guides, and 2 spotters.
as long as there's only 2 people on the mountain.
The way I understood is he doesn't want to limit it to saying you have to have only 1 outfitter and
So
1
why does
guide.
it say no more than 2 outfitters, 2 guides, and 2 spotters?
No more than 2 registered outfitters, guides, and or spotters may be assigned to a client at any given time. And it's just saying, what it's saying on there is an outfitter, you hire an outfitter and they can also be the guide. Or as we talked about before, if you have multiple people in your outfitting group, one
Okay,
of those
so,
could
so
be.
it's, I guess it's just that the way it sounds, because when you first said that, I'm seeing 2 outfitters, like outfitter number 1 and outfitter number 2. But it's saying no more than 2,
Yes.
outfitters,
All of these
guides.
things.
Okay, that helps.
Yeah, because you can't have 2 outfitters that are hunting the same species and same sex at the same time.
Okay.
For one client.
My bad.
No, that's a good question.
Well, like I said, I'm not a lawyer, but I mean, if you understood it the first time is that way, and then I read it and I was like, there's 2 ways to understand this. That's what I mean is we need to smooth some of this out. It needs to be smoothed out.
I want to go back to the comment man over here. I'm a little more leaning towards this where it's like, I think we have a deadline and I think that the division has already put a lot of work into the recommendation as it is, and we have to start with something. I don't think the door is slammed to us that what you decide today is written in stone for the next 20 years. We can agree on something today, or at least recommend it, right? Something today. we can even put in that motion that they form a committee that reviews this rule over the next year, and next May, they bring forth recommendations for that committee when we've had a chance to let the current recommendation hit the dirt and see how it goes. But yeah, and the other thing I guess I would say is that I think we all see it here, even amongst ourselves, and also when we deal and talk with the public, that and I'm including this, like I read the rule, but I didn't go read the legislation, right? And maybe if I'd read the legislation, a lot of my own questions would have been answered. And maybe there's other people vice versa. They read the legislation, but they didn't read the rule, right? And so I think a lot of the answers are there. And another thing the division could really easily do if they didn't even want to go the committee route is that we put up web pages all the time. Like, let's put up a web page, frequently asked questions, hammer this out, make it clear to everyone what it is. And then all of our guides, outfitters, and people looking to hire someone, you can go to this frequently asked questions page, get most of your questions answered right there. Like, oh, I'm not a lawyer, but I had someone water it down for me so I could understand it. So I think there's a couple ways that we can solve this problem, whether it be a committee or simply a web page. But I definitely don't know that I feel comfortable with making a recommendation that this get tabled or not move forward. I don't know that I'm comfortable with that.
Well, and I don't know that, I guess I didn't hear anybody make a motion or even suggest it be tabled. There's definitely different things that we can vote on. We have to come up with something tonight, whether we accept it as presented or we, seek to change dates or renewal or whatever.
Yeah.
It's an action item and we have to act on it.
Yeah, and maybe my intention there was misunderstood, but this is brought down by the legislature. It's going into effect. There isn't anything, we're not gonna be like, oh, we're gonna table the legislature. My idea was to put forth a group of folks that could take that legislation and implement it into a digestible and palatable for both guides and the division and the legislature rules that are outlined based on the authority given to the division from the legislature to put this law into effect.
And
So that's a great
sorry.
thing. We can certainly, if that's a motion you want to make to do that, in the future, we certainly can do that. But we still have to act on the action item itself, so.
What I was just going to say, this is a very similar conversation that has happened in all of the other RACs. So I'm expecting a committee to be formed.
Yeah, and I would just say, I think that's a good idea because there are certain requirements from a Forest Service standpoint with outfitter and guide. So it'd be nice to have that input as well. So.
And that's a great point, Darren. I know in some of the comments and stuff last night, it was never brought up, but I mean, you can go and register with the division as an outfitter. That doesn't mean you're going to get a permit because a lot of the Forest Service are so full now, they're not issuing new outfitter permits.
Unfortunately, the 1 to 2 days don't apply very well with.
We were just, we were just trying to
government turn
come underneath
slow.
I
the
like
feds
that,
and we're in
but
good
we
shape.
probably can't turn it around that fast. Yeah. So
I'm hopeful for a couple days.
Yeah, an outfitter's got to get a special use permit from the BLM, from the Forest Service, from the division. So they're working pretty tirelessly to go through government regulation for this stuff. So getting
Well,
it figured out is
That
good.
was the whole reason for moving it from December, which was absolutely needed.
Yeah.
I just think that we could do a little bit better and move it back just a little bit more to give them time to even, make sure they're going to have hunts and then hit the renewal button, make it a little simpler for everybody. So.
I
Any
guess-
more discussion?
Yeah, I guess I just really appreciated your comment of it moving from DOPL to Division of Wildlife. Is there increased compensation or increased employees going to happen with this increase of work to the division?
Yes, we've had
Okay.
to hire an individual to sort of run the program.
Okay. No more discussion. We'll entertain a motion. Anybody want to take a stab?
I'm not going to take a stab, but I think two things a little bit more on the discussion is the Forest Service thing needs to probably be addressed where, right? Because it hasn't necessarily where Forest Service requires a number and division requires a number, so nobody can get a permit. So I think that's
And BLM.
and BLM.
Don't forget.
Federal. I think I did.
Sorry, Tana. Darren looks pretty proud though. And obviously the committee.
Yeah, I think it would be good to bite this one off in chunks. I think one motion might be a much because the division put out two things that maybe we should consider changing. And then this RAC's had a couple discussion on things. So maybe in chunks on this.
And maybe I can redo my initial or potential motion. So under the application requirements, it's going to be under 2D, all necessary federal permits to operate on federal land. We would like that to change in the Forest Service employee did come up with a statement in a couple other RACs that we just say that you must have those permits to operate on a federal land. And because I do believe that the Forest Service and the BLM requires our permit number to be on your application.
So that's a separate process, basically.
Correct.
So what we're voting on would have nothing to do with the Forest Service.
Correct. It's just that
We
line.
register, the guides and outfitters register with the division. And at that time, then they have to go through the Forest Service to get their permits. So
So why don't you read the phrase or sentence you were using one more time for me?
So the phrase that has come up in other RAC meetings is that we, instead of how it is currently stated, all necessary federal permits to operate on federal land, we state you must obtain federal permits and have them on your person in the field.
So moved.
I'll second it.
Okay.
There's no way I'm going to say that again.
So
we can work that out.
I don't know that we need to make a motion on that. Do we?
Yeah, because the rule's written saying something else, and they're suggesting that that's in conflict right now. And
It
so,
is a conflict. It's impossible, as the rule is written right now, it would be impossible to get either or.
yeah,
Okay.
so a change needs to be made. So moved, and I got a second over here.
All right. So we have a motion on the table to accept what he said. Yeah.
I think it's adding the language about federal land.
You're striking language, right?
Yeah.
So you're gonna-
You're adding the language of obtain.
Obtain a federal land use permit and have it on you in the field.
And remove the verbiage that says you have to have that permit number.
It's, because what it says right now is an application to be an outfitter must contain all necessary federal permits to operate on federal land. So we would require their number for our application, which they can't get because they're waiting for our number to get their application.
So the motion needs to be to strike that verbiage, basically.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
I got a question on the motion. How does that affect fishing guides that would be operating, let's say, only in state parks or navigable waters that aren't managed by the federal land management agencies?
We don't require, if there's, and that might be what we say is all applicable land agency special use permits must be obtained and be on the person in the field.
So they could still get the guiding permits or the outfitter permits without the.
Yeah, we're not,
Okay.
all we're saying is we're not requiring you to show us that you're getting those numbers, those permits. We're just saying you must get them.
Okay.
So Chris, I think the motion is to strike out the language that says you must have all applicable federal permits to saying, in order to apply, and we're going to stay, you must obtain all applicable federal. Yeah, and have on your person. That's the motion. You still okay with that? Still got a second.
Still second it.
I just got one question on that. Do we want to add any verbiage in there or not as to the formulation of a committee or to?
Let's make that separate motions.
Yeah.
Let's,
Separate
yeah,
motion.
let's make, if we want to do that, I think that's a good one, but let's make that a separate.
And my motion right now is specifically to this one line item, no other part of the motion, no other part of the rule, I'll say. So just that.
Chris, do you know what line they're talking about? We're good.
Okay, so we have a motion by Cash, seconded by Scoot. Kirk, sorry. You pointed that direction. So, any questions or comments on the motion? Let's vote. Scoot?
Yes.
Kirk?
Yes.
Charles?
Yes.
Cash?
Yes.
Dana?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
And Steve?
Yes.
Motion carries. All right, we'll entertain the next one.
I'm not talking this time.
I don't know. I thought you talked just fine. I think the other one they had concern about was the part E. What was it?
Oh, yes, that is correct. And so E of that same section says attestation that all workers' compensation insurance and commercial liability insurance to cover employees and clients has been obtained. And which is a fine statement. There's just been people raise questions regarding 1099 contracted employees and that they don't have to have these things. And we're not, in effect, we're just saying, follow the rules that you need to follow. And there has been a RAC that has said, we're okay with what that says. There's one RAC that said, we're striking that. So it's up to you. So.
Wasn't the argument for the people who struck it out? Is it somewhere else in the rule or in the law where it says you have to follow all other state and
It
federal?
does. It says that. And you have to do that anyway, whether it says it in this rule or not.
Right.
So yes, it's.
So I think the messaging I got from the division was you felt like your bases were already covered.
Yes.
Instead of getting in the weeds of should it or shouldn't be there.
That's
correct.
Correct.
All right, I'll make a motion to strike out part E in the rule as it stands currently.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Cash, seconded by Charles. Any questions? Scoot?
Yes. Yes.
Charles?
Oh, yes.
Cash?
Yes.
Dana?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimous. Okay. That's not all of it, but we still have more.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to ask the board to direct the division to form a committee on on partners that are interested in this law, let's say federal partners, guides the division on the public at large, on how this rule will be implemented and how we will define guidelines and define gray areas within the bill that was passed to make them rule.
Okay. You got that, Chris?
Eric?
Steve?
Yeah, I apologize. This is probably out of step, but it has to do with that committee. I just want to comment. I think one of the fruits of a committee is looking at things in the future. I could see easily an organization of the guides kind of advocating to do like New Mexico and Nevada does in terms of preferential withdrawing. And I just think there needs to be a voice in there, and a committee might be a good way to have a voice in that process. So I apologize for doing that out of step.
No problem. Good comment. I think that if we make the motion to put the committee together, I think we have to trust the division that they will put the right people in place. But if we want to be specific about who is invited to that committee, we certainly can do that, but
Can I ask a question? I guess I'm not understanding what this committee would do. What is the purpose of this committee?
Well, when you read the law that was just sent to you, there's some pretty gray areas in there. And this would basically take the law that is the authorization to the division to implement that legislative action and have them create rules around that law to implement that legislation.
so Dana, for me, this committee would be to give the public at least a chance to participate, because the public had no chance going through legislature. The rule's already in place. We can't change that, but we can discuss and talk about some of the things like dates or how it's implemented and how it, at least it gives the public a little bit of a voice.
It also clarifies for the guides what actually will constitute the actions of entering into a hunt, what constitutes the actions of an outfitter being hired versus a guide and a spotter. It'll give them clear direction instead of just reading what the legislator has put on. Legislation has been put on a piece of paper, which can be interpreted multiple ways, has been done in this RAC meeting here.
True. I guess I have two comments there. It seems like the RAC process would be a public process. And so if people have concerns about this and how it's being implemented, you can bring it through the RAC. I guess 3 comments. My second comment would be, I think there's a lot of committees and I'm not really understanding this purpose. And so I'm afraid we're committeeing things too much. And then the third comment is, I think there's some very capable people within the division and legislature that can come up with those definitions. I don't think a committee is needed for that.
Dan, I guess I think one thing I would say, and I don't want to speak for Charles, the way I kind of view what maybe Charles is proposing is that there's a rule already written that's going through the RAC to get approved. And very often when we have rules, sometime along the line, we'll create a committee for that rule. It'll be a rule committee and we'll work through it. I guess normally things are usually in place for a little while before we do it, or we create one to make a rule. This is kind of an odd one, but I do want to back up a little bit what Dan said in that I really like the public process. That's why I'm here tonight. I've appreciated some of the committees that I've sat on. There's other committees I've been really frustrated with. I personally am really gun shy about a committee getting put together and who would get to sit on it and how this would end up affecting the public interest. I guess we have the law as a backstop, which is different than a lot of our other rules. And Eric, I agree with you. With all these committees, I'm like, I have to trust that the division will put together the right people, right? But man, it makes me nervous.
And I think that selection process has been changed a little bit by the board in the last little while to make that a better process. So yeah. So
good.
I personally would be comfortable with.
Do we know this early on? I mean, obviously we have some questions here. Do we know this early on that there's going to be such big issues that a committee is necessary at this point? Is that something that we can move forward with? Try this for a year. The committee's not going to change anything before this year anyway. So could it be something that if there was a need to form a committee, it could happen next year? I mean, maybe we determine, hey, the division did a great job. We don't need to form a committee for this.
Well, I think that's entirely up to you guys. I mean, we have a motion on the table. If you don't agree with that motion, want to see it hold off, I
think that we are going that route right now. It will be implemented within the year without any public input from people that these will affect other than the legislature. I think that forming some sort of committee not only gives other entities a voice in how this rule is put in, it also gives the outfitters a voice in questions they may have this year that have come up because of this rule, so they can formulate a better process and how this is outlaid. If it goes through and everything's clean and people are like, well, that seemed to be easy, then it seems like the committee will meet for 10 minutes and it'll be done and they'll pass that through and we'll be all good and it'll be great. But it also doesn't kick the can down another year because forming a committee will take a year. So then we'll have 2 years of this rule trying to be implemented. We might have some problems with people getting in trouble where they didn't understand the law completely, wasn't put together
Well,
very well.
it's the guide and outfitter's responsibility to know and understand the law. That's our responsibility as hunters, as sportsmen, whatever. We need to understand that. So, but to your point, let's not kick this can anymore. We've got a motion on the table.
Yeah, I'll second that. And I'll just say that's part of the board. We can send it up to the board. They could take this and other racks and have a conversation. At least we're throwing that out there as this is something to look into. So
If we want to pass it, great. If our rack doesn't feel strongly that it's needed, then the vote will show it. So.
Can you repeat the motion?
You repeat it and I'll make sure.
I'd like to make a motion to put together a committee to review the law that was brought down by the legislature and make some rules based on the authority that was given to the DWR to implement this law.
Okay, so a motion by Charles, seconded by Darren. Any discussion on the motion? Scoot?
I'll say yes, knowing that that doesn't mean we're going to make a committee, but that they'll more than likely talk about it on the board level.
Okay, Kirk?
Yes.
Charles?
Yes.
Cash?
No.
Anna?
No.
Darren?
yes.
Brad?
Yes.
And Steve?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-2. All right, we got that part of it. We still have,
Eric, can we speak a little bit to why we voted no? I'd like to hear.
sure. Let me, make notes here. Okay.
For me, I voted no just because I realize that we're going to have this rule the way it is for a year, but I don't know what the wildlife board's going to do and when they're going to set up their committee. And I would like to see this rule play out for a solid hunting season, maybe 2, before we had a rule committee to decide what worked and what didn't work. And so that was my reason to vote no. I think it's premature.
Okay, Dana?
I have similar thoughts there. To go full, like to demand like a committee without knowing if we really needed one. I just felt like it was a premature concern.
Okay, thank you. All right, we still have the remainder. If anybody wants to take a stab at that, if anybody likes the idea of adjusting the renewal date.
I don't want to get ahead of the forthcoming committee, but can we clarify what's intended, whatever that intention may be for those that are packing out animals? And not saying you have to right now, but I guess my motion would be, let's clarify that in the rule, whatever that intention is, because they say, well, our interpretation is this, but it doesn't say that anywhere. So it'd be nice to have that in writing so that the guide or an outfitter knows, oh, I can only send 2 guys, or yeah, I can send all 8 of my spotters out here today or whatever to go pack this bull out.
Okay, we have a motion to add verbiage clarifying that once the animal is down, that the pack out can include as many people as needed.
Yeah, I guess I don't care how they make I mean, I hope that they make it to where it's easy for a lot of guys to go do it just to get it out of there quick. But one way or the other, I think it needs to be clarified just so they know and it's not open to the interpretation of individual officers.
Okay, we have a second on that motion.
I'll second it.
Motion by Scoot, seconded by Kurt. Any questions or discussion? Okay, we'll vote. Scoot?
Yes.
Kirk?
Yes.
Charles?
No.
Cash?
No.
Dana?
Yes.
Darren?
No.
I'll get 3 and 3. Brad?
He shouldn't have said that.
Steve, so I say yes.
And Steve?
Yes.
What'd you say, Steve?
Yes.
Yes, okay, passes 5-3. Curious, with the no vote, why would you not want clarification?
Oh, I just think that that's kind of one of the things that we need the committee to figure out. I think that it's in all processes, it's good to get that animal out, but there is also concerns that if you need 8 spotters to get it out, and what are you back there for anyway? You know, there's a bunch of different questions that can be asked about that kind of stuff. So I think that's why I brought up the committee, was to clear that out, and that should be something that they figure out.
Yeah, for me, this RAC just passed a motion to make a committee to hammer that out, so I didn't want to double down on it. And on top of that, in a public meeting, I had an officer just explain to me what the definition of when a hunt ends. And so that is on public record. So I guess if I need an attorney, that is what I will reference as to when my hunt ends.
Why would we not want to clarify that so we don't have to go get an attorney?
I hear you. No, I hear you. So that was my thing. It was like, we just made a committee and I already have on public record what the definition is.
Yeah, that was mine.
Against the committee. What are you talking about?
That was mine. He kind of defined it, so I thought, why do we need to redefine it?
Okay.
And the committee could address those kind of issues.
Okay, very good. All right, that's still not everything.
I'm getting tired. Just kidding.
You.
I think the rest is fairly well defined to this point. Removing any committee interpretation, but so I'll move that we approve the rest of the recommendation.
Okay, we have a motion by Brad to approve the remainder as presented. We have a second.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Kirk. Any comments or questions? Okay, vote. Scoot?
Yes.
Kirk?
Yes.
Charles?
Yes.
Kat?
Yes, yes.
Dana?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimous. Thanks, Cad.
I just want to say, I really appreciate the input and the interaction with the RAC. This is the purpose of the RAC meeting, so I appreciate your efforts. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we will move to our next action item. The other Chad is now on the hot seat. The original Chad.
Yeah, he should have taken most of the heat for me there, so.
This is our CWMU public land variance request. Chad, you got any clarifications where we open it up to questions?
No, we can just jump.
Okay, any questions from the RAC?
Yeah, we got the email that the Ingham Peak, TL Bar Ranch, and Blackhawk variations won't serve the public at large. Do you have any comment on that, or does that seem correct?
It's a little bit subjective, I guess. So, TL or not TL Bar, Ingham Peak, we have there that they're trading more acres, opening up private lands through trade lands more than the public acres that they take in. Our biologist over that region actually hunted those trade lands this last fall and said he saw 70 deer on it. So it does hold wildlife. Some of the best land in Ingham Peak is that public land too. So I guess it's a little bit subjective. And
I have a question, a couple of them, I guess. Mostly concerning the TL Bar Ranch. Do you have that map that you could pull up for the TL Bar Ranch?
I thought that might come up, so I am ready to log in.
This one I have a little heartburn with. Justifying the public benefit. So in your presentation, you're basically what you said, the public benefit was that they took a 50-50 split rather than 60-40. I looked up the tags, and for this year, they have one public, one private. Now, Cash kind of give me some direction, some guidance here, but I look at that originally and I thought, well, how does that look differently, 60-40 versus 50-50 if you only have two tags? Cash did inform me that that's based off of their COR, which is a 3-year term. So my question still is, how many, I didn't look at how many tags they had for the full 3 years, but how does that look differently? It's a very small, for such small tag numbers, it's a very small change.
Yeah, and so it is. It's that principle. Even with moose and pronghorn, where a lot of times they are small numbers, we're able to do those over several CORs. So it just can never go below the percentage for the public. So yeah, it's been a 50-50 one tag to each for quite some time now. So, but if you go over 10 years, then they do get that extra tag. The public does. And I guess the other comment would be is that it's a 640 acre piece inside of there. So it's also not a ton of public
But
land.
as I look at the map with the new corner crossing legislation, that piece of property is not landlocked. It
Yeah,
used to
and-
be,
Yeah,
but it's no longer. It's accessible on two corners. So I don't know. It's not something that I'm absolutely against. It's just, I feel like we can do a little bit better in justifying to the public the benefits of giving away public land.
yeah. And I want to be clear, because we talk about it a lot about it not being accessible. It's just for the hunts. And I don't think you were trying to say that, but just for anybody that's listening, it's just for the hunts. You can access it. So now with corner to corner, yeah, you could go access it to hunt coyotes or have a picnic or walk your dog, like whatever you can legally do there, you could still
But
do
we
that.
could access it if it's not part of this. We could access it to hunt big game as well.
Yeah, then you potentially, it's a pronghorn only, so yeah, you could hunt pronghorn potentially on that piece. So
I guess that brings a question to me. I don't understand then if it's trade land and it's part of this CWMU, if I had a pronghorn tag that wasn't within the CWMU, I could corner cross there and go hunt that portion of BLM.
no. Anything that's inside the CWMU hunt boundary, you can't hunt those species in there.
Okay, I guess that's the kind of the question he was bringing up there. He said he could hunt big game, and then you went and said pronghorn, and that was.
If it was not included in the CWMU.
Yeah,
With it being included in the CWMU, that's the thing is, we're essentially saying that the public cannot hunt, well, pronghorn in this instance, but if it were for
that's how
anything else.
Yeah, that's how I understood it. And then I think you just said pronghorn, which confused me a little bit, but I guess the brings to the heart of the question after the 10th Circuit Court approved and said that it was legal to corner cross. If we're giving away parcels in a CWMU that have corner cross access, it feels like we're more taking from the public than we are giving to the public.
yeah, and that ruling hadn't come out when we had the advisory committee. So it is something that we need to work through as a division going forward on how we're going to tackle that. It's pretty new. Most of our boundaries for this fall were passed in December, so it doesn't feel super fair to change that. These are ones that are going to renew this summer, so even by the time, but no, because the decision is going to be made. We're trying to get a decision on these, a recommendation or a decision from the wildlife board, so that when they go to renew this summer, that they'll know whether they can include that public land or not.
And this would be for a full 3-year term if it's approved, correct?
Yeah, but we can do change applications as well. So like if we came down with corner crossing, if we came down with some stance on that, we could potentially say, okay, this is your last year, and then we're going to change everything back to match whatever we come up with. So it is in a 3-year COR, but we can do a change application on a yearly basis.
Okay, thanks.
Do we plan on doing a change access for these CORs? For that?
Do we plan on doing a change application? We haven't had the discussions yet on what to do with the corner crossing. So if we did, those change applications would come through the same time as the renewals in November.
So essentially for this year, if we can't do a change application now because we're saying that it would be unfair, but it's setting up the ability for someone that may want to corner cross there to take it up federally and bring that down to the state to say that federal law, which supersedes state law, says that you can corner cross here and do all the things on public land that you could, but the state is saying you can't because they manage the wildlife. It just kind of muddies the water a little
No,
bit.
so not really. If they can corner cross, like they can corner cross now, like there's nothing prohibiting that. They can't hunt pronghorn. The division in general, like we create hunt boundaries. Hunt boundaries a lot of times have private and public land in them. So a CWMU is a hunt boundary. So that's all it would be. Like the corner crossing is, it kind of changes the way we might approach things because it's before we deemed it not legal. So like in this one, we deemed this as inaccessible. Now we might deem it as accessible. We could come up with a stance on this one too, saying this is a good identifiable boundary to make it work. Or we could say, no, it doesn't work. But there's just potential. So, because there's 3 ways that public land can be in a CWMU. Inaccessible being one of them, but boundary is another one. So there'd just be further discussions on what to do after we go through that, I guess.
Okay, I think you cleared it up for me with just the hunt boundaries portion, just kind of cleared the mud out of there for me, so appreciate that.
So the public access is still there. Public just couldn't hunt pronghorn on that section of public land.
Yeah.
So Chad, I don't know, you have these numbers and it sounds like we'd be talking about what you guys are going to do on their new core this next year, but what was the total number of permits for TL Bar on their last core?
I think it was 1 public, 1 private each year. So 6. Yeah.
So I guess where I get really uncomfortable with this is that it's like, oh, what we gave to the public is we changed splits. Okay, well, I always have a problem with that because the CWU can also just take a different permit number and end up with the exact same number of public hunters. And so I kind of feel that way here just a little bit. It frustrates me a little less because it's just 640 acres. I get that. But what I feel like is like, this is a token offering. It's a pseudo offering. We'll change splits. That's how it'll help the public. But if they drop out of it, and I hear you like, well, what if they up permits though? The public will get a bigger cutter. Maybe over 10 years, it makes a difference. Well, what if they drop out of the CWMU program? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I have no assurance that on this core, we're going to get more for the public. And I guess maybe that's premature to say because maybe you guys will recommend a higher number of permits out there and the public will end up with 1 extra one. But I guess I'm just a little uncomfortable if we've already done 6 permits, it's already been 50-50, then this is a paper change only of going from 60-40 to 50-50.
Well, it's just been 50-50 all along. So if we go back, I was the biologist over there. Now it's been a while, but it's, 8 years ago. So if you do that 16 permits, that it's 50-50, which is 8 and 8, which technically, and we do this on other CWMUs, that over a 10-year period, it equals out. There'll be a year that there's no public hunters. And so they've actually stayed true to, we've only done 1 and 1. That's all as far as I can remember. So I don't see this one changing. Like there's not a ton of pronghorn out there, but I understand understand the concern too.
So obviously they've had this variance in the past under
Yeah.
the same conditions.
Yeah, this
Right.
is one that it's been passed. It's a renewal one. It's had public land in it since its inception. One of the things to consider on this one is that it doesn't have 5,000 contiguous acres of private land. So
Yeah, it
this
barely
was-
meets the requirements.
Yeah, and at the time it was grandfathered in. So even at the time that it was made a CWMU, it didn't fit at that time because it needed a variance.
Doesn't matter, the new legislation would give them permits anyway.
Yeah, so now they could.
I told you I was going out with a bang.
Yeah, if they pull out of a CWMU, yeah, maybe they get.
Yeah, so. Okay, any other?
Yeah, I got a couple more questions. Chad, and I should have reached out to you before, so I guess we'll help you educate me in front of God and everyone. When we did the CWM rule committee, I feel like I have a very vivid memory of us taking a vote on trade lands. And what the vote was to say that if you do trade lands, they're open to all big game hunting. And I felt like that motion passed. And maybe I'm remembering that wrong, but I've been a little concerned with a lot of the rhetoric on the CWMU advisory committee and in some of the RACs that I've seen, where they talk about what species of animals can be open on trade lands is up for debate. And I was trying to read the rule as it states right now, and in two places in the rule, it says that trade lands means private lands opened up for big game hunting. So there's not an option to pick and choose which big game. It's open to big game hunting. Maybe other type of access that's open, but when it comes to big game hunting, if you do trade lands, it's all species. Am I remembering this wrong? Is this not the interpretation?
It's big game, yeah, for big
Okay.
game hunting. Yep.
Okay, so I guess I want to put that on the record. Like when we sit here and be like, wow, man, this CWMU, they're just an elk CWMU, but on their trade lands, they let you hunt elk and deer. And to be fair, they have to. The rule states that your trade land will be open to all big game hunting. So what I'm trying to drive at is that is not a voluntary give. The rule says it has to be that way. But to also speak to maybe when we're sitting here considering what does the public get out of this, to be fair, it's not just like their trade lands are only open to pronghorn hunting, which they used to be able to do that. Now it's, you can go hunt any big game on the trade lands. So anyway, I wanted to make sure I understood that.
Just maybe I can do a couple clarifications.
Yeah,
One,
that'd be
on
great.
TL Bar, when we're talking TL Bar, they don't have trade lands. So it's just public land in there. I think where some of that confusion is Prohibition Springs actually offered, like they wanted to do all big game hunting, but they also wanted to they have a lot of upland game and stuff. And they said, look, we don't want to just limit this to that. So we'd actually house that one in walk-in access. And then just say they don't get compensated for that being in walk-in access. And then it makes it so they can do all big game and all upland game.
Thanks, Chad.
Any questions from the audience? Whoops, sorry. Any more questions? Any questions from the audience? Online comments?
We had two people fill out this survey. One person somewhat disagreed and one person neither disagreed or agreed. I think the comment was referenced, but the comment on this item was that public land should not be included in any CWMU. With today's mapping systems, there's no reason to include public land to make a recognizable border. Also, with the 10th Circuit ruling on corner crossings, we need to make every public acre available to the public and not include them in CWMUs.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, there's no public comment cards, so we'll go to the discussion from the RAC. If we've discussed it enough, we'll open it up for motions.
Well, the first thing I want to say is it's nice to hear that Prohibition Springs is opening up some walk-in access for upland games. We talked a lot about big game here, and it's nice to see them reaching out to upland game hunters. And I think they don't get as much credit in these meetings we have, and I think it's an important part of continuing hunting, and it's a great activity for folks. So that's awesome for them to do that.
I guess just one comment I'll make is that, there were 3 really important topics on the CWMU rule committee, and it was splits, which went nowhere. Then it was how to handle units over objective on elk, which is all we talked about for a year. And then public access and public trade lands. And I will say that there was a lot of robust discussion about trade lands. And I think the overarching principle was that it just needs to be clear what the public gains when they give up public acres to hunting. And I actually think there's been the rule that came out gave a lot of significant improvements and more clarity to trade lands, including posting them, which was not happening before. And so I don't get me wrong, I too have a hard time stomaching that there's public acres that are maybe close to a certain activity. And that's really what we're talking about, right? But the new rule is substantially better than the old rule. And I appreciated when a couple of the biologists were asked some really poignant questions about how is this trade fair for the public? And they were able to give some personal experiences about what they saw, what they did, and understand that there's a compromise here. So I'll say that no matter what we vote for here, it's a compromise, and you just got to decide if the benefit to the public is large enough.
Any more discussion? Not, we will open it up for motions. Don't everybody speak at once.
I'll make a motion that we do not grant the land, the land swap. That doesn't sound right. The land,
The variance, basically the variance to include public land.
to include public land for the TL Bar Ranch.
Okay, we have a motion on the table by Kirk. Do we have a second?
Can we discuss the motion?
Huh?
Can we discuss the motion?
Sure. Yeah, we can
Well,
discuss it.
I guess I just want to make sure that we all understand that the Ingram Peak and the TL Bar Ranch are renewals. And they've been going on for a long time. And there's 2 new applications for the land variance, which were Black Hawk and Prohibition. And so I guess, I don't know, is it appropriate to say, like, has there been problems with TL Bar since it's a renewal? I don't know.
I guess for me, and I don't want to speak for Kirk, it's his motion, but for me, things changed with the corner crossing thing, because now this piece that's been given the variance on is, I don't have as much problem when we include public land that is truly landlocked. But when we have public land that is now by new rule accessible, I think it needs to stay public, but
I got a question on that. Are you only talking about the TL Ranch, or are you looking at other areas that might be corner accessible to the other 3 units as well that are within this?
For this motion, just the TL Bar Ranch.
I guess since we're chatting about the motion, I know you're looking for a second. This is the worst part, by the way, when you make a motion and there's all this chat and you're like, I just want a second. I get it. I just want to say, I think for me, I find it really interesting that, this RAC just barely, we voiced a lot of concern with new legislation and saying, hey, this isn't really clear to me. I feel apprehensive about what the law does or doesn't say. But we have one court issue one ruling, and we feel very confident that in every circumstance, no matter what other laws or concerns may be, I can always corner cross. And we're willing to make a decision right now to say, even though that's a fact and we should cut this out because that is the fact now. I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm pumped about corner crossing. I'm super stoked to not be the first guy that tries it in Utah, or even the 10th. So anyway, that's the only thing I just find it, and everyone might have a different reason, but I find it really interesting that we'd be like, I can hunt that piece of dirt. Okay, Okay. Do you do it? Yeah.
All right, we have a motion on the table. We still need a second.
I'll second it.
Okay, it's seconded by Dana. Any further discussion on the motion?
I just think if we're just going to do it for the TL bar, we've got four two renewals, two applications in front of us. We can't just single out the TL bar. We need to, if we're going to do this, we need to do it for them all going forward.
And I guess I would have to look at the maps and see. This one stuck out to me because it's one piece. Some of the others, if there's corner crossing stuff, maybe they need to be. I think honestly that one of my comments would be that I hope that the division in the future will, because of this new legislation concerning corner crossing, will take a good hard look at all of these and maybe make some adjustments going forward. But to your point, Charles, I think, we got to look at them all individually because the maps, if it's truly landlocked, to me, it's a different story. But if it's not truly landlocked, then, but we have a motion on the table for the TL Bar Ranch.
So
Let's vote on that motion.
So can I ask, Kirk, since we're talking about this, why are you singling just that one out?
Yeah, just the general benefit to the public isn't there on that one. And so, part of that is corner crossing and all that, but part of it's the 50-50 split, which could potentially be a imaginary benefit.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table. It's been seconded. Any other discussion? Let's call for a vote. Scoot?
Yes.
Yes.
Charles?
No.
No.
Dana?
No.
Darren?
Yes.
Brad? And Steve?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-3.
I'm just wondering why she seconded it and voted no. Maybe you can. I don't know. Can you?
She just did. She just did.
The discussion changed your mind. It was, I want to get through this.
It passes 5-3?
Passes 5-3. Yep. So, you want to clarify your no
Yeah,
vote?
I like the idea of corner crossing, taking those parcels out. I just feel that it may be unfair to just not look at Ingram Peak, Blackhawk, or Prohibition Springs here and just focus on TL Bar.
So if you want to make a motion for those others, you certainly can.
Well,
but the motion on the table was just for that one. So,
yep.
Cash?
Maybe there's people out there that I decided to go ahead and rely on the advisory committee's recommendation. Advisory committee looked over this, they passed it through. And to be clear, there was a CWMU that came forward that they denied. They did not back. So I decided to go ahead and rely on the advisory committee's recommendation.
Okay, Dana?
I had the similar thoughts as Cash. In addition, I guess I like to move slow with agencies, and the corner crossing is new, and I just think people need time to adjust.
Okay. All right, so that's the motion that, for one, we still have the remainder of the proposal.
Can I make a motion to ask the board to have the DWR look into these into areas that might be accessible by the public due to the 10th Circuit ruling, and see if the benefit outweighs the negative to the public, and let the public hunt those species on that land if they can cross the corner.
So I don't know if we can do that at this point. I mean, and we could certainly ask that moving forward, but the board and the division has a proposal, and the board will have to vote on that, one way or another. So if you want to make a motion to look at that
Yeah,
moving forward,
we can't
Great.
change anything right now, but I think to bring that portion up to the board, have them consider it and see if they want to throw that to the DWR, if they want to just say continue as is and pretend that circuit ruling didn't come through.
okay, yeah, if you want to make a motion, make that motion. We'll
Okay, I'd make a motion to have the board delegate down to the DWR to look at these CWMUs and if some of these corner crossing accessible sections can be opened up for public hunting for the species that are involved within the CWMU.
I've got a question on it. Are you asking the division to go and look at all existing CWMU variances, or only when they come up for renewal? Keep in mind that landlocked definition has changed.
Well, that's it, is that they're no longer landlocked. So we'll be looking at sections that can be corner crossed that are no longer landlocked. And he just brought up they can change those at any time, really. So we could start looking at those, and whether they want to go through the process of when they come back for a renewal application or they want to do it all at once, that's up to them. That's not my decision. That's the board's, and that's the DWR's.
Okay.
You mind if I just comment on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to look at this, and with corner crossing being legal, one of the other things is we haven't allowed CWMUs to have corner to corner to count for the minimum. And so it's whichever way we turn out, it's going to probably be the same for both, right? So, yeah, just
that TL bar, for instance, it's got that section that sets to the east of
Yeah.
that public land, and for a boundary, it makes sense to include it. But you could include that because of the corner crossing now. So I mean, it can work both ways.
Yeah, so I was gonna say.
it's going to work both ways.
It's gonna, yeah, I was gonna say, I want to be clear, like Chad just opened Pandora's box. So be really clear. So be really clear. Before, you could not count corner quarter to get your contiguous acreage to become a 10,000 acre CWMU or a 5,000 acre deer CWMU. So if we want the street to go both ways, great. Now we can corner cross into public acreage, and in return, CWMUs get to count corner to corner to make acreage to become an elk or deer CWMU. That's a game changer. To be able to hit your acreage to be able to get the qualifications for CWMU. So, yeah.
That could be a really big can of worms. So. You,
For a second? Or did we get one?
we do not have a second.
I wanted to ask a question, Chad, that builds off of your motion. Did the CWMU advisory committee, when they were reviewing this year's, did they talk about corner crossing, or that was still in the court, or any rulings? Did that come up? I can't I don't recall it coming up when I watched the video, but.
Yeah, I think we did that advisory committee in February, and the ruling came out in March, I think. So I don't think this was even on the radar when we had the advisory committee meet. But that's another thing I'd say is, going forward, as all this stuff shifts, not only are we going to look at it, but the advisory committee is going to look at those and potentially make different recommendations than what they would have in the past.
So you want to keep your motion?
Well, gosh, it feels like it just got more complicated. Yeah,
That's why we have the discussion.
I wanted to, well, I guess let's have a discussion on it here then. So if we look at those corners and we say that, hey, the public can now officially access those via the 10th Circuit Court. It hasn't been looked at by the Supreme Court as much as I know, at least, which could be brought up in the future. But those acres are accessible. The DWR is making a call saying that those acres are not accessible for something like pronghorn hunting or elk hunting, but they're still accessible. So my thought is, why could the public not come in and hunt elk if that's public land?
'Cause
What
there's
Cash
no
is
elk there.
saying is that opens it up more to, well, the corner to corner can open up more CWMUs, that 10,000 to 5,000 acre variance. Well, didn't we just have legislation come in that it only has to be 4,000 acres too? Isn't that something that just came?
I could let Chad speak to that, but the original legislation had a whole lot of CWMU talk in it, and that was all ripped out. Except for
So-
talking about how CWMUs can't participate in the voucher program that was ran on under that bill. So what it does is that and we were talking about this before, right? A landowner or landowners now get this opportunity to sit back and say, what's more valuable to me, to participate in the voucher program and get my permits that way? Or now that I can go corner to corner and I can make my acreage, because the legislation was really geared towards CWMUs that could not make acreage. They couldn't make the 4,500 for a deer or the 9,000 for an elk. And for those group, where do they fit in? And that legislation created a place for them to fit. But if that group of people now, because you can go corner to corner and pick up acreage, maybe they'll decide, oh, it's actually more beneficial for us to be in the CWMU program because now we can make acreage. And so maybe they would jump from the voucher program over to the CWMU program.
So Charles, let me just throw this out there. And I don't want to deter, if you want to make the motion, go right ahead and do it. I don't feel like the motion is necessary because I think the advisory committee with this new legislature, as these renewals come in, that is something they will look at. But if you still want to make a motion,
Okay, yeah, I guess my thought on the motion was it's putting it on the record that we will have that looked at. Like, it's not just we're going to look at it or we may look at it. It's the board has directed that this will be looked at.
so if you want to make that
This is
motion, go
going-
right ahead.
But I guess
If you want to keep the motion, it's already on the table. We just need a
I'll keep it,
second.
and if it doesn't go through, it doesn't go through. But I think public access, public activities is important, and I think that protecting that is something that I'll stand
All
behind.
right. Do we have anybody want to make a second on that motion? Okay, motion fails by lack of a second. So we still have the remainder of the proposal to make a motion on.
I guess I'll make a motion to accept the rest of the proposal as the division.
Okay, a motion to accept the remainder as presented by Dana. Do we have a second on that motion?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Kurt. Any discussion on that motion? Let's
Can I
vote.
just ask?
Steve?
Yeah, I guess I'm going to ask Cash. It feels like what we're doing right now with not seconding that previous motion and this motion that's moving forward is that we're putting a lot of trust in that advisory committee. I'm going to ask Cash, can we trust that advisory committee to represent the public?
I put that to the division. They're the ones that's supposed to make that committee and who sits on it and who does not. I think it would depend on which committee member you asked and how long they've been there, how jaded they are to answer that question. So I think there's always a lot of robust discussion.
Sure.
And there's a lot of good people that serve on that committee. Does it always go the way I think it should? Probably not. But it's the system that we're set to work in. And I really appreciated the fact that the committee did vote down a CWMU that came forward with a proposal to get public acres in. And so I thought that was a good token sign. Now, does just one good decision redeem a lifetime of poor decisions? I don't know. But I'd like to think that generally speaking, the process is working. And I really think that after the rule committee got to meet and some better guidelines were set forward, that the committee's had a lot more teeth to be able to say what is a benefit to the public or not. And so since you asked, I felt the most comfortable with what Eric just said, which is in my mind, these cores are a business contract between the division and that CWMU. And the contract states some really clear things that they're supposed to do and some really clear things that the division's supposed to do. And I don't know how comfortable I am coming in after a contract's been set and saying that we're going to change that. Unless under some pretty stringent circumstances, because I like to hold the CWMUs to their end of the contract just as much as anything. And so I would prefer to see the process continue on that it is, that as a core comes through, it gets reviewed by that advisory committee. They make recommendations. And like Chad said, I think if the division or the state becomes a little more comfortable with the court ruling and can give some guidelines on that the advisory committee would take that into consideration. So I guess I'm putting a little faith in the system. And again, maybe there's some people that feel like I shouldn't, but that's what I would say. And it looks like Chad has a correction.
That's why we have multiple people on committees, right? So it's not one individual's ideas.
Not a correction, just through that concern with the advisory committee and whether we trust them, that's a public meeting too. So anybody can show up, any public meeting, you have the chance to state your opinion. So it's not a closed door meeting that happens. It's open to anybody to come. So for that reason, I trust that committee.
Yeah, I'm glad that Chad said that, because that was actually some of the other correction that came out of the rule committee, that meeting needs to be better advertised so the public understands that it's available to them and that they can go and participate in that process. And I do think the division has done better at getting the word out about when that meeting is held.
Thank you, guys.
Steve? Okay.
That was very helpful, both of you. I appreciate that.
All right. We ready to vote? Kirk did. All right. Scoot?
Yes.
Kirk?
Yes.
Charles?
No.
Yes.
Anna?
Can I vote no? Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Yes.
And Steve?
Yes.
Motion carries, however many to 1. 7-1, yeah. Charles?
We're just looking at nixing out the TL Bar Ranch, and I think that we're holding them to a different standard. We didn't even look to see what kind of acres were in the other units. This group here just passed it over and didn't look. And I feel like that's not very fair to the TL Bar Ranch to say that, well, you have this piece of public in here, you don't have any trade lands. We didn't sit down and go through these after we made that.
Well, that's what you're supposed to do before you get to the meeting.
Yeah, but we talked about it here at this meeting, but didn't look.
You could have made a motion. So
I did. It died in second.
Okay. That kills that one. So we'll move on to the next one. Chelsea, you're still with us. You haven't given up on us.
Not yet.
All right. Any clarifications that you'd like to make before we open it up to questions?
Yes, please. I would like the opportunity to just read and clarify a few points that came up during the public comment, if that's okay.
Okay, absolutely. Go ahead.
All right. So first, House Bill 309 is a bill that was passed by the Utah legislature during the 2025 session and went into effect on May 7th. The requirement to hold a valid hunting, fishing, or combination license was put into state law and is not a rule that was implemented by the Wildlife Board. The DWR and the Wildlife Board are now charged with implementing and upholding this new law. Therefore, this rule proposal before you is meant to define terms and make some additional exemptions to this requirement as permitted by law. Second, I want to clarify the authority of the Wildlife Board in relation to this new legislation. The bill states that the Wildlife Board may not exempt individuals on the basis that they are not engaged in hunting, trapping, or fishing within a WMA. Therefore, the scope of the board's authority is limited to the following 2 items. The bill specifically outlines the Wildlife Board's rulemaking authority, stating that the Wildlife Board may make rules to define purposes of 1, what is meant to be expressly exempt under this title, and then 2, what constitutes an educational program or education or visitor center. Those are the only 2 things the Wildlife Board has authority to make rules about for this one. And then lastly, I will also say that this law and this rule are applicable to counties that are class 1 and class 2. So that includes counties Salt Lake, Utah, Weber, and Davis.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any questions for Chelsea?
Yeah, I just want to clarify, this is for waterfowl management areas as well, too, correct?
Correct. We do consider WMA to include waterfowl and wildlife management areas.
Any other questions?
And then it was in the House bill that it would just be class 1 or class 2, correct?
Correct. So that's a total of 30 WMAs in across those 4 counties: Salt Lake, Utah, Weber, and Davis.
Okay. Any questions from the audience? Was there any online?
Just one person said they needed to read this.
Okay, no comment cards, so we will open it up for discussion to the RAC.
I brought this up last meeting, but I feel like we sure are getting a lot of laws coming down that apply to the DWR, aren't we? I feel like it's been quite a big group of meetings as we try and figure out these new laws and how they are defined by the DWR.
Make sure you know who you vote for.
I'd just like to make a comment, like, and there's been a lot of discussion, and I know this particular rule right now doesn't really affect our region as much, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't discuss it or whatnot. I think there's been a lot of frustration with this idea that, you know, you got to pay money to access public land. And I find that just an interesting thought personally, because I was like, man, I feel like I pay money to access public land all of the time. My national parks, my national monuments, my national recreation areas, like I'm already paying money to access public land. And so in a lot of those instances, right, like that public land serves a very specific purpose. And I like to think that those fees go to serve that purpose. And in a lot of ways, in my mind, I think this is just an extension of that. You have land set aside for a specific purpose. It costs money to run that purpose. If you want to enjoy that land, there's a cost to get in. And that's just one of my thoughts.
I guess I didn't bring this up during the questions, but it is a question I do have is how does the DWR plan to enforce this? I mean, I just think of the small waterfowl management area we have in Moab and how many recreationists use that do not hold hunting licenses or fishing licenses. I can only imagine in the class 1 or class 2 that recreation is that much higher. It's going to take a lot of time for law enforcement, I could imagine.
Yeah, Chad, are you available to answer that in person?
I'm coming.
Thank you.
It just sounds like additional revenue to me.
So law enforcement section does have a WMA enforcement plan in place that we've coordinated through our division. It is heavy on education. That's the direction we will start with this, but we will be documenting our interactions with the public just so we can report back to the legislature how many people we did talk to. But to reiterate, it will be heavy on education for a while.
Any other discussion? No, let's entertain a motion.
Eric, can I just say something quick?
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Sorry, this is going to be totally changing the subject. I have no problems with this. I do kind of find it ironic after listening to that argument that we have all this access of public land and access of land, and we don't talk about this for shed hunting. the same principle. So again, I'm sorry, but I don't have, in terms of discussion of this, I have no issues with what's going forward with the division.
Okay. Somebody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept as presented.
Okay, we have a motion by Charles. Do we have a second?
I want to give Charles a second.
Seconded by Scoot. Any discussion on the motion? Let's vote. Scoot?
Yes.
Kirk?
Yes.
Charles?
Yes.
Cash?
Yes.
Dana?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
And Steve?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimous. Thank you, Chelsea.
Thank you all.
All right. Two more. While Heather comes up, do you have any clarifications, anything you'd like to address before we open it up for questions?
I don't. Just thank you for having me. I know I'm not famous like the Chads, but I appreciate being here.
Any questions for Chelsea?
It's Heather, but that's okay.
Heather, sorry.
I can also be Chelsea. She's great.
Yeah. It's my last time. You won't. You won't. I actually had the opportunity to talk with Heather over the phone, and I had some questions, and she was able to answer them. And so I don't have any questions right now, but well, with the sage grouse, one of my concerns, anytime we're dealing with animals that are on a list for being endangered, or they aren't endangered, but they're on a watch list. So there's always concern when we do things, how that affects the people around us, ranchers, things like that. And that always concerns me when we start restricting people from their livelihood or things like this. And she clarified to me that these were all, there was existing things in place for all these areas. These are supplementing existing flocks, herds, whatever you want to call them.
Populations, yeah.
And so that helped me feel at ease that there's not going to be new or ill effects for surrounding people. So
yeah. Definitely. So these are like he already said, Mr. Chair, that we are just putting birds in places where there already are birds, but because of their just incredible fidelity to their nesting, brood rearing, and lekking sites, we're hoping to increase distribution into newly developed, restored habitat where they did exist, but now they're just not using that usable space. And if we can just help to increase that distribution a little bit with nesting, lekking, and brood rearing sites, and that's just going to help us grow the core and help sage grouse as a species of greatest conservation need, as you mentioned. And so it's really just helping everyone win in that regard. And these are all in existing sage grouse management areas or SGMAs. So there wouldn't be any new restrictions to worry about. Everything would be just as is.
I got two questions for you, Heather. What do you see this potentially affecting any of the tag numbers that are associated with sage grouse, like on Blue Mountain or other units where they're available?
I could see this increasing permit numbers, definitely, because we are increasing distribution within hunt areas as well as they are within SGMAs, but that's a good question. They are also within hunt boundary areas. I can also share a map if you'd like me to, just to kind of show where those relocations will exist. Oh, that's so loud. Sorry, my man hand. All right. So here's the Blue Diamond Mountain area source sites here. Tabby Mountain will be the first place that we'll take them to, this green area over in the Strawberry SGMA. And then we'll focus on Browns Park after that, just adjacent to this hunt area. But we focused on these areas because they have been increasing and they're stable to increasing populations. They're doing really well. We can't stockpile the birds. As long as we take 50 or fewer birds from a source site, we're having negligible impacts on the source site. So they're not going to incur any deleterious effects that way. Then on the Parker, we have these within that release site is within that hunt boundary area is the orange, and the source site is the blue. So we'll take birds from the blue source site to Browns Park because anything from Blue Diamond will be too close and they'll just move back. And then same thing with from Blue Diamond to the Tidwell Slopes, Mytogi Mountain area, because the source site from the Parker will be too close that they'd move back as well.
I guess that touches on my second question, is how you trick the birds into adapting new leak sites. It sounds like you're kind of addressing that by moving them farther away, but do they just get into those areas and establish new leaks? I mean, you're talking about how they're pretty drawn into one area. They don't just abandon that activity, do they?
So I think I understand the question, but as far as establishing the new leks that we're looking to do in the Browns Park and Tabby Mountain area, that's why we're taking juvenile males. So we plan to take 10 to 15 juvenile males in the fall, so they'll have all winter to establish. And then they'll be looking for those new lekking sites in the spring. And like Brian Maxfield explained in the Northern RAC, he's going to make some clearing areas, make sure they have some of those open spaces for lekking, and then hopefully that natural instinct will take in there. And then he plans to also take additional females in the spring as well to keep them holding at that site, and they'll be released at those leks.
Okay, thank you. And then this has been successful in the past.
Yes, so we've done the fall male translocations have been done with sharp-tail and Gunnison sage grouse. This is a newer methodology for sure for greater sage grouse. But if we don't try something new to try to break that fidelity cycle, we wouldn't have the methodologies that we have today if we hadn't done that. So it has worked in other galliforms, but we're doing something a little bit different here. As far as with the Parker release site and brood translocations, that has shown to be very successful in some studies that Dr. Dahlgren was a part of with North Dakota and Wyoming. And that also helps to keep that fidelity there at the brood rearing site because they can't travel as far with broods.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, any questions from the audience? Any online? No comments, but survey?
Oh, 100% strongly agree.
Okay. No comment card, so we'll go right into RAC discussion.
I'll just say that I appreciate the division's work for our upland species. As an adult, I've just utterly failed in being involved with upland game species. But when I was a kid and a teenager, that was like my whole world, and I got so much enjoyment out of it. And so I appreciate any efforts to try to better establish our populations here in Utah so that there can be more of a natural experience on the landscape with upland birds.
Any other discussion? We'll open it up for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Charles to approve the as presented, seconded by Cash. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, vote. Scoot?
Yes.
Kirk,
Yes.
Charles,
Yes.
Cash,
Yes.
Dana,
Yes.
Darren,
Yes.
Brad,
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimous. Okay, next one. Heather's still in the hot seat. Possession and release of pen raised game birds, rule amendment. Any clarifications?
No, just the summary of changes is that we will conduct random disease sampling throughout the state at CHAs or any of our pen possession holders for mycoplasma. We made a few other clarifications just to help people better understand the rule, and hopefully that's a little bit more clear, but nothing to clarify.
Okay, thanks, Heather. Any questions? Any questions from the audience? Online survey?
The one respondent said they somewhat disagreed.
Okay, no comment cards. So we'll go to DRAC discussion. No discussion, we'll open it up for motions.
I'll make a motion to accept the division's proposal.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion by Darren to accept as presented, seconded by Charles. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, Scoot,
Yes.
Kirk,
Yes.
Charles,
Yes.
Cash,
Yes.
Hannah,
Yes.
Darren,
Yes.
Brad,
Yes.
and Steve.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimous. Thank you, Heather. That brings us to our final action item. And for this, I will turn the time over to Chris to elect a new RAC chair. Before I do that, I just, if there's anybody still online, just encourage you to consider putting your name in to serve on the RAC. There's, if you're not sure how, there's reach out to the division. There's links that they can send to you. It's not all bad. If you think you have too many friends, just, get on the RAC. You'll lose half of them. So.
Let me interrupt 1 minute before Chris starts too. There are several people going off the board after tonight. And I, for one, have been very honored and flattered with the involvement, the education that has provided me, and those people have been very informed, very involved, and educated on the issues, and have all contributed, I felt like, a lot to the process. And going forward, I just hope that our board, our RAC board, will benefit with the same quality. And I think we owe all of them a lot of thank you.
Hear, hear.
Thanks, Brad. I've heard several comments from division people that they think that this is the best RAC, one of the best RACs, and that's all because of you guys. So
You both stole my speech. That's exactly what I was going to say. I just say amen to that. I am very proud of this RAC, and I'm honored to be a part of it. And I've heard that, like Eric said, I hear it from board members. I hear it from division leadership, director's office, and chiefs and coordinators who come, to these RAC meetings each month and present. I think they're they're all very impressed with the preparation that takes place, the good, lively debate that happens, but the respect that we have for each other as well, or that you have for each other. There's a lot of differences of opinions at these tables, a lot of perspectives. But at the end of the night, there's just respect shown and motions made and things are voted on and we move forward. So thank you for, we have 6 outgoing RAC members who have served from 4 to 8 years. So Dana representing BLM, Eric, Darren, Forest Service, Sunshine, who is our non-consumptive, Kirk, and then also Lynn, who is our elected official. So all 6 of those this is their last meeting. But thank you so much for your service and for being the voice of those who you represent. You did it very well and very professionally. And we do have a Bronson pick for you at the back of the room. Make sure you grab one of those before you go. I asked you which, it was like, I don't know, a selection of 20 of them. And I asked each of you which one you wanted. And all of you selected 2. I mean, so that, a lot of you like the bighorn sheep and a few of you like the elk. And so take that as an appreciation token or gift for your years of service. Just thank you so much. So we will get we'll have a new group up here. I think we'll replace, RACs are anywhere from 12 to 15 members. We have 15, so we're on the high end, but it'd be great to replace these 6 if we can't replace them, but to bring in 6 new people. And hopefully we get some good applicants. And if you know people who are interested, like Eric was inviting you to do so, and those who might be listening, apply. We'd love to hear your voice. And the application period ends at the end of the month. And myself and Eric and our new chairperson will be interviewing RAC applicants and selecting those people, hopefully in June. So to begin the new RAC cycle at the first part of August. I think there's some RAC trainings that'll happen in August as well. But anyways, I opened it up for votes for chairperson and co-chairperson the last couple of weeks via email. Thank you for those who submitted nominations. There were a few nominations too where I reached out to the person and said, do you accept the nomination? And there were a few declines, which I respect and understand. So in the end, we have 1 person for chairperson and 1 person for co-chair. So I'm not even sure that there needs to be a vote. That's why I never put it out for vote. So I'll let you know. Scoot Flannery has been nominated as our chairperson, and Cash Stallings has been nominated as our co-chairperson. So I don't know if we need a motion or a vote, but there were no other nominations. So you
I
win.
just think someone got sick of me making motions.
I'll make a
move we
motion to
those
accept and
2 as
congratulate.
our chair and vice chair.
Okay, motion made by Brad to accept Scoot as our chairperson and Cash as our co-chairperson.
I'll second that and congratulate them.
Seconded by Charles. All in favor, say aye. Anyone oppose? All right, congratulations. And well done, Eric. You've done a phenomenal job. And the dedication it takes to go to the board meeting each month is to be commended as well. Thank you.
We're leaving it in good hands with those 2. So with that brings us to the end of our meeting. We'll entertain a last motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion and also say thank you.
I'll second that.
All in favor?